Hi, welcome to ASBIve podcast Impact Series, where we dive into social entrepreneurship and see what type of positive changes it can give in the economy of Malaysia. Today is the first episode, and we're glad to have our first guest of honor,
Thank you.
Wan Dazrik, CEO and founder of Purpose. How are you today?
Good, thank you. It's a new year also.
Oh yeah, Happy New Year! Happy New Year!
So happy new year to everyone also, and
Yep.
and I'm honored to be the first, ASBhive podcast impact series with you, especially Reza. Thank you so
Yep.
much.
So the reason why, you guys will see later why I invited Dazrik to be our first ever guest, because of course before we talk about Impact Series whatsoever, social entrepreneurship, the idea is to really understand what is SE in the first place, right? We'll deep dive into that
Sure.
later, but before we go, we talk more about this topic, right? Maybe you can share what is Purpose.
Yeah, great. So Purpose is almost act like a venture builder, but we're very cognizant of the fact that we don't want to, just venture build everyone and anyone under the sun. But the call to action or the cause is really trying to help to promote impact-driven enterprises broadly, or social enterprises. The idea here is actually if we could help more businesses that doing good, have impact causes, and help them to either scale or sustain their impact, and that's where our intent to sort of influence that change lah. So Purpose, if you in a short word, again, it's really a venture building, and we took venture building as a loose term. So it could be advisory, it could go to market access, and it also to some extent also maybe help them to do a bit of a financing and help them to scale and grow lah. So that's the true intent of what Purpose is, and if as far as nation building goes, we wanted to help more Malaysian social entrepreneurs lah, which we find it a bit challenging, and maybe we can go into a bit details then later, because of the market. We've seen a lot of social enterprises outside of Malaysia, in fact in Indonesia, a bit more thriving, but that not to say that we don't have social enterprises in Malaysia. It's just that matter of time when the market is right, and inshallah I think at some point we will actually help Malaysian social entrepreneurs.
But you talk about when in a matter of time, right?
Yeah.
But so just also to share to audience, so me and Dazri, we go way back in this social enterprise ecosystem. And even before you started Purpose, there must be a reason why you started Purpose, right? You must have seen a lot of like changes, challenges throughout that path, right? And if I'm not wrong, social enterprise in Malaysia is started by not to say started by, but it's kind of the topic of the angle of this industry was being pushed by a government agency a few years back, I think, called Magic, right? Malaysia government.
Malaysian Global Innovation
and Creativity Center.
Yes.
Okay, and that was in 2014.
15,
So you were there
Yeah.
in 2014,
Yeah.
and you were part of the team that first created the blueprint of social enterprise in Malaysia. Maybe you can share some context, right? Because at the time I understand Magic was focused on entrepreneurship.
Correct.
But of course there's tech startup, there's the normal the brick and mortar kind of startup entrepreneurship, and then there's social enterprise. How does it, like, what were the challenges when you guys wanted to start this S ecosystem in Malaysia?
I think the biggest challenge, if you wanna put it that way, is actually it has a bit of a divergent school of thoughts, because when you talk about entrepreneurship in general, I think the end goal for most is actually unicorns and exits and stuff like that, right? Which not necessarily be the case for social enterprises, because social enterprises, for most of them, are very community driven, impact first, and doing business along the way by means of sustainability of scaling, right? Coming back to timeline tadi yang you mentioned too, I think even before Magic, as far as I know, I think the whole concept or the notion of bringing or spurring social enterprise in Malaysia is pada tahun 2013. And at that point of time, our ex-Prime Minister met Professor Yunus, and that's when the concept of social business was, I guess, formally introduced in Malaysia. And I think between you and I, we know some of our peers who have been in the ecosystem much longer than we do, and they are doing that although maybe the concept or the terminology of social business is not as widely known dalam 15-20 tahun yang dulu, but I think when Magic came into the picture, you're right, the bigger mandate is actually to grow or building entrepreneurs for Malaysia.
Yep.
And at that point of time in 2014 or 2015, part of Magic, the Malaysian Global Innovation Creativity Center punya mandate is actually to grow the social entrepreneurship.
Yep. Yep.
And the idea here is actually not just focus on social business, tapi they widen the horizon and make it a social entrepreneurship, because social business is a subset of a social enterprise, kan? And it's good or bad. Sebab the good news is actually, yes, there's a bit of push of social enterprise, and you mentioned about the blueprint that was first started in 2015, 2018, and then we did, I think, 4 batches of the National Social Enterprise Accelerator. Between 2015 to 2017. But the challenge to that is actually it was, orang kata, bertindih dengan philosophy of the normal entrepreneurship, the tech entrepreneurship. You want to go 5x, 10x, and then you want to build unicorns, right? I'm not saying that is wrong, but I think the philosophy behind running a social enterprise is slightly more different than a normal tech entrepreneurs.
So that's when you mention is bercanggah lah dengan the normal tech startup punya, like what do you say, end goal, right? Of what Magic sees as a success. But at that time, what does Magic punya like KPI to see this SE grow? Because okay, I'm part of one of the accelerator program that on the SE, but I noticed that there's no sharing of what is Magic's KPI at the time, because of course you guys did. So Magic doesn't do accelerator only. So like for me, I remember I went for your wise words with certain people already in the scene, boot camp, workshop, accelerator program. I mean, there's a lot, right? There's also at the time you guys also providing small grants. In a way. But what was the KPI at that time to see, okay, I've helped this SE. What am I looking for from them in the long run? Do you guys have a KPI at that time actually? Hey, just test it out and see how it goes from there.
I'm gonna offer 2 different KPIs per se. One is very organization in terms of what Magic was set up to do, and this is in parallel to what the mandate to pretty much build more entrepreneurs in Malaysia, kan? Because I think Magic was started in 2014, and the intent behind that under the Ministry of Finance then was to build entrepreneurship as a mainstream career. And alhamdulillah, to some extent, I think we've succeeded in that, right? So you've seen more entrepreneurs now who are thriving, like it be, Qasem, the likes of Grab and sebagainya. They're still in the play, right? And the ecosystem's building. Similar to social enterprise, right? So the idea here is actually, like people like you and some of them, our peers like, Picha, maybe to some extent, so BGBG and sebagainya. They also been running for a good 5 to 10 years, right? In parallel to the development of Magic and their programs, one way or another, whether it's through boot camps, accelerator dan sebagainya, they have benefited from that. So memang the intent of Magic was really to build that talent pool, so that we have that entrepreneurs, regardless social or tech, to drive, I guess, to some extent the economy of Malaysia lah, by creating new jobs, creating new ways of helping communities and sebagainya. The second one that I wanted to maybe share, and this is my personal perspective, is that beyond the talent pool, and that's why very few initiatives that Magic have done is actually outside of that capacity building and workshops, incubator, accelerator yang cakap tadi, is actually the blueprint. So the blueprint here is not necessarily under the capacity building punya mandate under Magic, but we realized to sustain the ecosystem, especially for social enterprise, we were very pragmatic. We say, look, kita tak nak buat blueprint yang 10, 15, 20 tahun. We just do 3 tahun. And the idea of 3 years, because then we create that urgency. It's not just saying that, okay, this is a landscape mapping, but we wanted to build a roadmap di mana beyond the talent, can we get market players ready? And beyond the market players ready, can we also then influence what we call systemic change when we talk about policies and sebagainya lah. And that's why I think, regardless, some people might think we have not succeed or fail, but I think the fruitation, regardless again, in the sense of timing tu, cepat ke lama, we're bearing the fruits now lah. So sebagai contoh, nanti maybe later on with other podcast speakers also you speak about accreditation, right? The origins of the accreditations is actually masa blueprint. We say, okay, in 3 to 5 years, when we started that blueprint, can we effect systemic change? And that's when we spoke about, maybe some recognition, maybe some incentives and sebagainya. And alhamdulillah, I think so far
it's kind of actually okay. I mean, I didn't really read. Okay, maybe I read the blueprint.
It's a long time ago. Dah nak 8-9 tahun dah tu.
I read the blueprint, but I mean, I know it's still somewhere. But yeah, true. Like the blueprint was 2015
yes,
to 2018,
18,
right?
Yeah.
And then the latest blueprint that we have was Semai 2030.
2030, yeah.
So in a way, yes, there is a gap.
Yeah.
But still can say like some of the box were ticked lah.
Agree.
Right, you mentioned about accreditation, the incentive, things like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so because now this is just example of then the past and now, right? Of course, at the time it was quite challenging. At the time, like you mentioned, when the social business is already there, but the SE ecosystem was not in Malaysia. So we have, as what I recall, like we have Epic, BGBG. Saura, maybe I think Arus, Souls, right? So these are the few that already existed before the SE, before Magic kind of like amplified the word of social entrepreneurship, right? But now, like this is what actually almost 10 years, right? 10 years. It's nice. It's 10 years after, right? What's your take on the current overview of social enterprise ecosystem?
I think the evolution phase is getting shorter and shorter, right? Why I say that, if you just take Malaysia specifically, kalau kita tengok those yang dah successful sekarang, at least take them 8 to 10 years, right? Let it be BGBG who started in 2014 tak salah. Discover Muay Thai also around the same time. Souls is probably longer when you spoke about Souls and Epic dan sebagainya. What I hope to see is actually because of that evolution yang the dynamics of the market changes faster, and this has a lot to do with tech and technology. And you see a lot more social enterprises are using digital, and let's take education sebagai contoh. A lot of social enterprises who are focuses, in fact, if we know some of them who are using technology to bridge education access kepada yang tak berkemampuan seperti in Borneo dan sebagainya, right? And these guys are using tech as a enabler, which means that they can do their impact faster, more efficiently, and arguably would be able to sustain longer lah. My hypothesis is that yang mana yang baru-baru, at least slightly pre-COVID 2019, and if they're sustaining, they would get to sustainability or profitability much faster than the likes of yang kita cakap tadi lah, Discover Muay Thai, BGBG dan sebagainya. If they take 10 years, I'm hopeful these guys, the newer generation, would take about 5 to 7 years.
You mentioned this is the one that after pre-COVID or post-COVID, because I do feel like the COVID thing kind of like, it's kind of like, not to say that certain people might win from that kind of situation. Some people might suffer in that kind of situation, right? Like company closed down, had to let go employee. But some of them, maybe throughout that process, suddenly there's a need to work with them. Because I think one thing about COVID, during the COVID period, what I like was the support local. I think that support local kind of amplified, because even government was really helping the ecosystem in a way. Like, I mean, if you guys out there were not aware, during that COVID period, government kind of like really push support local and also social entrepreneurship, because at that time they understand government need a lot of funding to provide aid, support, but with social enterprise, it's more like you buy from SE, and then in a way you also support the community, right? So I think that kind of help in a way. But so because we go into that, right? That's why I think I want to just segment into 2 areas with you, right? Maybe number one, let's talk about, because we talk about current ecosystem, right? What do you feel is the challenges? Maybe 2 or 3 challenges that you feel is happening for SEs right now. And then from there, maybe you can also add what will be the opportunities for them as
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
for the current
Yeah,
ecosystem.
you're right. So just bridging from your points again, I think you're right. The period yang I'm more hopeful looking at in terms of trajectory, aside from yang zaman-zaman magic dulu lah, kan,
Yep.
yang before 2019 semua tu, is that masa COVID, you mentioned that a lot of social enterprises yang community focus.
Yep.
They are probably the ones, you're right. So some of them maybe dah pivot to become a full-fledged NGO, which is fine, right?
Yep.
But some of them yang betul-betul dah jalan and running and sustaining tu, in fact, our investment hypothesis for purpose is that, if they are resilient over that 3 years between 2020 hingga 2022,
Yep.
now if we are going to do something venture build with them, it's more of how do we scale them up.
Yep.
Because chances are hypothesisnya kalau diorang memang create impact pada tahun tu, yang mana business tu very hard to sustain dan sebagainya, now it's matter of opening new channels for them to grow.
Exactly.
In that sense, right?
Exactly.
The current challenge and also our current hypothesis is that because sekarang banyak tech and innovation that comes into the play, so it will be interesting to see a new breed of social entrepreneurs yang would use tech to sort of scale their impact 5, 10, 15x more by using technology. The impact areas could be sama macam education, underprivileged, struggling single mothers and sebagainya, but can they use technology to sort of scale that? And the landscape to this also sebab sekarang ramai yang speak about ESG.
Yes.
Ramai yang speak about SDGs, right?
Yep.
And social entrepreneurship by essence would actually target, kalau ada 17 SDG tu, there's probably about 5 or 6 of them that would target, right?
Yep.
So I'm hopeful, right? So that's why now for purpose also, we kind of like go into this ecosystem building mode as well. So it's not just about helping nurturing venture build existing social enterprises to scale, but our investment ataupun our venture hypothesis now is actually if there are new talent in the social entrepreneurship space, and we think the dynamic diorang punya character would be much different from yang 5, 6, 7, 8 tahun dulu lah. And that's why I think in terms of the opportunity here is actually how do we mold this talent. Maybe they don't know they want to start a social enterprise.
True.
Maybe they just want to start a business yang ada impact. That's the one that I think promising for Malaysia lah.
Three things I want to highlight. I want to actually deep dive more, right? The first one, right? We go to the first one was on NGO.
Yeah.
You mentioned some of SEs, unfortunately, they have to go through NGO mode, right? And I think that's the kind of like misconception to the public. Do you agree on that? Do you feel like because of that, there's a few SEs that goes to NGO that kind of impact ecosystem in a way, or you just feel like in general people just don't understand what is SE? Do you feel SE and NGO looks the same?
Yeah.
What's your take on that? Do you feel it's just a matter of because are we saying that this SE ecosystem is not mature yet for people to really know the separate?
Yeah.
Or you feel like because a lot of SE themselves doesn't really sometimes they accept donations, sometimes they accept random business. What's your take on this?
I think it's both. I think you hit it right. Dua benda tu, right? One is actually the market awareness lah. I think we spoke about social enterprise, orang still tak faham sebab kalau macam you and I, we came from a school of thoughts of saying kalau buat business, profit margin kena tinggi, right? Yes. So it's a profit maximization game. Also to some of them say, but if you're doing business and do charity, kan, right?
True.
But that's when the sustainability bit comes in. In fact, for me also, my personal journey, for example, I came from a school of thoughts, profit maximizing kalau buat business, right? But then I realized that's how capitalism works. Right? But if you see the younger generations now, it's not just okay lah, but money, but also I want to do good. Right? So it's very different from kita punya zaman sekolah dulu kan, 15-20 tahun dulu. But I also wanted to emphasize, right, not social enterprise cannot solve anything. Everything. Sebab tu, I think the NGO space tu memang kena ada.
The balance must be there lah.
Yeah. Because non-profit still do, good things, right? They not necessarily need to become a business. But having said that, also if you've seen, I think you know more also about this, is actually our social enterprise accreditation, kan? They open that net. And I believe it's also a decent move to open
Mhm.
that, because I think a lot of NGO pun sekarang with everything that's happening in the economy,
Yep.
sustainability is an issue. Sustainability bukan yang SDG tu,
Yeah.
but running their
Yeah,
operations.
maintaining the business in the longer run.
Maintain their organizations and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
we've seen instances whereby NGO become a social enterprise. Masa COVID dulu, I think because of MCOs and stuff like that,
Yep.
some social enterprises yang diorang punya impact area tu a bit hard, right?
Yep.
And I'm not talking about yang
Mm.
community yang cakap tadi, but
Yep.
maybe supporting refugees, supporting
Mhm.
orang asli dan sebagainya, because of MCO punya restriction.
Yep.
They can't run a business, which
Yep.
is fair.
Mhm.
Then they pivot into become an NGO lah.
Yep.
Then they can get grants and support and stuff
Yep.
like that. So in answering your question short, memang betul. It's dua benda di situ lah. So one is actually because of market awareness.
Yep.
And this is what we try to solve with new talent. So macam tu, kalau dia nak start business, dia nak become an entrepreneur, maybe impact entrepreneurship or social entrepreneurship, it's a main career for them. And NGO lah tadi. Kalau NGO saying that, okay, sekarang susah nak dapat grant, macam mana, boleh tak I pivot my organisation to a business, and that is a social business, social entrepreneurship.
And the second part that you mentioned was on tech, right?
Right.
So tech can be good,
Yeah.
right? But tech can also, I'm not saying it's not good,
Yeah.
but it also can be irrelevant
Yes.
for SEs.
Yeah.
I remember when I started my SEs during the Magic SEO
Yeah.
program, I was one of the few that
Has
incorporate tech
Yes.
in
Yeah.
the program. Like I think there's 25
Yeah.
social enterprise in the cohort.
Yeah.
Less than 5 that doing tech. And at that time it was 2016.
Yes.
And it was tough because people be like,
Yeah.
hey, if you want to create impact, why you want to do tech, right? We need to focus on community. Dah lah buat tech, lepas tu buat environment kan.
Betul.
I think that too was a bit tough lah in a way. So I personally feel like not all SEs can be tech.
Yeah.
Maybe you coming from purpose kind of venture builder angle, investor. Maybe from an investor standpoint, you do need tech.
Right.
Because for investor standpoint in the tech startup,
Yeah.
there's a higher opportunity of investment in the tech space compared to the community space. Correct me if I'm wrong later.
Got you.
But on your take on that, right? How do you say that if someone want to start an SE, what do they need to have in their train of thoughts before they start? Like, should they straight away start thinking like, okay, I want to start an SE and hoping to get investment? Or I should start an SE, focus on my whatever I do first, investment can come later or need. And of course, another one question for you is because you're from an investment standpoint, how do you see this investment game for SE? Is there a lot of SE get investment?
Right. Yeah. So your first question too on
tech.
Oh, the tech. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, right? And I think this is where I think we should push our thinking a bit, right? I think 95% of venture build portfolios, and this is not just investment that we do, has a influence or component of technology. Now, I'm not saying technology ni yang pakai app yang tu je kan. So it could be things around having infrastructure, having just maybe a point of sales that has tech. Then they could track dia orang punya impact and sebagainya, right? And I use tech in that manner because you're right. Maybe in 2016 dulu the infrastructure, and because we just starting this ecosystem, is not as advanced as where we are now dalam 5-6 tahun. Since then, right, in 2022, and we talk about digital infrastructure, we talk about point of sales, digital literacy dan sebagainya. So for the new social entrepreneurs, I feel that by infusing technology, one way or another will help scale that impact. Whether it's just about storytelling, impact measurement dan sebagainya, right? So have that view on that. And you're right. So investors, even if it's not apa ni orang kata VC type of investors, in fact, if just impact investors also, if there's an element of tech that helps their businesses,
higher a bit lah.
The valuation would be slightly higher lah. To your question, and I think you know this more than I do, in terms of what makes a good ingredient to start a social enterprise, always start with intent. It's not, some people would say, I want to exit in 5-10 years after this and stuff like that. That's very VC mentality or entrepreneur mentality. Not wrong. But I feel that the purest, the right mind, the right people for social enterprise is actually with that intent.
Okay.
People like you and some others, right, who have pivoted. You start off with a plan A, right? But because you still have the right intent, business change, market change, whatever it is, you still pivoted and do something differently, but it's still in the impact space, right? And that's why nothing against social entrepreneurs yang grow lambat kan, macam yang 10 tahun macam biji-biji. Picha Eats also just starting into that phase. It's just because their philosophy is very different. I take an example of Picha Eats lah, right? So what they do is good and it's very deep. And I don't want them to scale, because if they scale, meaning that their impact beneficiary tu pun kena ramai, right? For those yang tak tahu, Picha Eats actually focuses on refugees, right? Which means for them to scale means that we need more refugees in the country,
which is not good. I mean, in a way, sometimes it's nicer to. It's a good point. I feel like I remember when I was talking to few SEs also, right, in a way, and I see they also talk to few investors, few government grants and things like that. They were like, hey, you need to scale. But from an SE standpoint, sometimes scale is not good, right? Because sometimes if you scale, you kind of gonna
the problem
leave behind. Either one, it means that the problem is bigger, right? Or you're gonna leave behind the one that you helped in the first place, right?
Fair.
That's exactly. I think it's really a good point to angle. Like, there's no harm. If this is a small circle of community that you want to help, because there's so many ways to help, right? At the end of the day, is what exactly why you do, why it's SEs, right? Which is go to my next point, right? Yes, now we want to talk about, you mentioned about talent pool, but I'm not sure if there's a lot of programs. How do you see this ecosystem in terms of this capacity building? Because we mentioned about when Magic days, right? The capacity building was massive. Right? Every week, every month there's going to be a program. And the good thing, because it's under government agency, so it's free. It is free. It's really, really cheap, right? But now, 2020, I would say, because we just start 2024, 2023. The whole year, right? Have you seen any, what type of resources or support system that this newcomer aspiring SEs can get? Is there any? Or is there anything upcoming?
So before I answer that, I probably just want to breach yang tadi pasal investment. But you spoke a bit pasal investment tadi kan, sebab the VC mindset is very different, right? But when we spoke about investment now, and I'm trying to go more of a mainstream investment as opposed to impact investment, there's more opportunities now since your time in 2016, 17, 18, because of this ESG and SDG. Now the capital market is arguably drying up. You see a lot of VCs also are not aggressively putting investment as how 2-3 years ago. And a lot of the matrix also have changed. Di mana it's not just about 5x, 10x and stuff like that, but also this agenda of ESG. Right? Which means that their matrix saying that, okay, now it's not just about scaling. Maybe now it's just about also that impact area. Right? So a lot of our VC friends or peers also, in fact, the LPs and the GPs also are saying that, okay, right now it's maybe not that 10x unicorn thing that we should focus on. It could be more about that tangible impact lah. And this also riding on yang ESG. Malaysia not yet in terms of the regulations. I think sooner or later it will become like Singapore bila kita dah ada listing, or at the bursa would need to have a regulation around ESG. Imagine the SMEs, which also part of it is SEs, will also need to go into the ESG mode lah. And I feel social enterprise now has a prime opportunity to be ready for that. Right? And kita tak cakap ni pasal carbon credits, trades dan sebagainya kan. But if a social enterprise already have that existing, imagine the type of collaborations, partnership, mergers and acquisition you will do with the big guys. Right? That's something to think about lah. And on that point, to your questions now, and you spoke about resource, right? I think collaboration is key. and purpose being a privately owned, very different from our days in Magic Lewis is very public sector government. We need to do more in the ecosystem, but we know our strength lah. We can't do everything in that sense. We don't have that resources. Which is why, if you ask me in 23, in fact in 24, I think there's pocket of support. But I don't think it's in a way that it's affecting systemic change now. Don't know why. Arguably, maybe our government stakeholders also are grasping the current situation. You spoke about accreditation. There are some changes with accreditation. For the longest time, we spoke about social procurement.
Exactly. Finally, I feel like there's something happening. I mean, we can't mention now yet. It's still in the pipeline. But it's something happening.
So it takes time lah. So that's why, I think from purpose standpoint also, we feel it's quite unfortunate, in spite of our limited resources, to not nurture the ecosystem. Hence why I believe collaboration is important, and that's why we're also in the midst of thinking about that capacity building bit, especially the one that I mentioned around creating future social entrepreneurs, right? The new generations of social entrepreneurs, and that's why if it's possible to work with ASB, to do this capacity building, whether it's incubator workshops or even boot camp. Right, just to tease it out, right? Just to get the gear moving again, before the big things that come in. I think it will come in. It's just a matter of time. But for now, I think in 2024, we have to be a bit strategic, and I feel that collaboration probably with public sector, private and education would be key. So
it's a good point. So I mean, it's something is brewing. We hope from ASBhive standpoint as well, to work with like purpose in terms of creating a boot camp. But just to share, because why does it mention about collaboration is key? It's not just purpose is in the market, right? Like, I mean, ASBhive, we're also trying to look into this space, how we can help to grow the ecosystem. But we have like Scenic, CSAT, we have New One, I mean, BGBG. Just now we mentioned about BGBG as a social enterprise. But right now, they're also evolving into creating more programs. So I think in a way, pre-days, we always get support from government agencies. But I think now it's moved towards, not to say we don't want support from government, but it's more like it's faster and it's more organically grow if it can't come from a bottom up, right? So I think that's something that is it's nice. I think that's something that I feel like for viewers who just if you just started into this ecosystem or SE, or if you're already in the SE ecosystem, I would say 2024 is the best year in terms of growth. I can see that there's more growth. I mean, accreditation is improved. I think that's something that all of you should focus on. Hopefully, get involved back in the community again. Last few questions that we want to ask from you. Number one is, if someone for aspiring social entrepreneur, right, what would be your advice to them if they want to start one?
In short, I use this Triple H model. Be honest, right? Why you want to start a social enterprise? If profit maximizing, money making is your top priority, I don't think social entrepreneurship is that for you. Because it has a different type of I guess burden and responsibility to your stakeholders. Bukan just shareholders, stakeholders, right? Your beneficiary and stuff like that. So be honest with that, right? The second H is humble. I think that's quite important. I think to stay authentic to what you do, right? And know that there's always room to learn, even though if you have made it, right, and stuff like that. But I think being humble is ingrained, because a lot of the stuff that social entrepreneurs do had to do with the community, right? And you don't want to be seen as above them, but with them in that sense, right? And the third one is hungry. So honest, humble and hungry. Hungry here, yelah, kalau lapar pun lapar. But hungry in the sense of being open to learning, right? So an example yang kita cakap a lot tadi pasal digital and tech, right? Even if you're doing quite okay, and America is a good example, right? So they infuse a lot of technology, digital. When they first started was just upcycling, recycling, but they kind of branch out and leverage technology, right? So hungry here in the sense of always learn, unlearn, and juga relearn lah.
Okay, So we talk about the ecosystem,
Yeah.
right? But I think this is one question actually I wanted to ask since what I know you since almost 10 years already now, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, why SE?
Right.
I mean, usually people ask this at the early
Oh
stage
yeah, yeah,
of a
yeah,
podcast, right?
yeah,
But I feel like I just want to like we understand ecosystem, seeing that you grow from you started from being a government
yeah,
agency at the time
yeah,
in the team of creating the
yeah,
SE ecosystem,
yeah,
and then you went out, you
yeah,
created created
yeah,
purpose.
yeah.
But in like in the interim, right?
Right,
You did a lot. I think
right,
you remember you are also part of the team that do research of this SE ecosystem
right.
in Thailand,
Yeah,
Indonesia,
yeah,
in Europe, things like that,
yeah,
right? Even until now, right? So
yeah,
what makes you delve into SE,
yeah,
especially when we were in the year
yeah.
of that typical traditional business,
Betul,
maximize profit in a way. But
betul.
why, especially from you,
Yeah.
to at more point that does it haven't start his own SE,
Yes.
but you are heavily involved. Why?
Yes.
Why
Yeah.
SE?
It's interesting because I feel for me personally, in terms of my
Mm-hmm.
philosophy too, I'm still learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when I would say this, but I would be retiring starting LSE when I'm retiring. But I get a lot of inspirations with social entrepreneurs like you and our
Mm-hmm.
peers. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
our colleagues outside of Malaysia as
Yep.
well.
Yep.
In terms of why sebenarnya I started my career in a normal, corporate, for example, right? So
Yep.
I've seen how corporations make more money and
Mm-hmm.
more money for themselves, and I'm
Yeah.
helping them in that way. In that
Mm-hmm.
way, right? At that point of time, I didn't necessarily grasp the understanding of capitalism as how we know it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
big corporations makes more money at the cost of
Mm-hmm.
largest stakeholders, right? So that's why social entrepreneurship seems interesting to me, is because it strikes a balance, right?
Okay.
Tapi yang ni masa kita 10 tahun dulu, right? A lot of people don't
Mm-hmm.
quite understand that. But
Yep.
now
Yep.
if you see, when we talk about ESG and SDG, it's shift that focus a bit
Yep.
and becomes a bit more balanced, right? Which means to a point that maybe,
Yep.
right, in the next 5 to 10 years, and maybe then when I start my social enterprise, which I already think about, I don't know whether 2024 would be the start point, but
Mm-hmm.
potentially, is that I feel social enterprise would be the mainstream of the new economy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I spoke to you at a point of time when we don't label social enterprise,
Yep.
right? That's when I feel social entrepreneurship has succeeded,
Mm-hmm.
because that is the very core of how we do business, right? It's not
Exactly.
just profit maximizing as how our business school of thoughts
Yep.
talk
Yep.
about it, but it's also about stakeholder value that we
Mm-hmm.
maximize.
Yep.
So I'm hopeful. You're right. We've been in this journey about 10 years.
Yes.
Maybe it takes another 10 years. I don't know. But we see the trends.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm quite optimistic. And that's why it keeps me hooked into the social
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurship space. Lah.
All right, all right. Thank you so much,
Yes,
Dazri,
thank you.
for sharing your insight and your journey
Yes,
in the
yes.
social enterprise ecosystem. I think it's quite inspiring. Also, I think it's also important for people out there, whether it's
Yeah,
existing or new, to know what exactly happened behind the scene
exactly.
before
Yeah,
where they are right now, right?
yeah.
So yeah, I think thank you so much for viewers as well, as this is our first episode of ASBIve podcast impact series. Stay tuned. Follow us on social media. Where we basically there'll be more
Yeah.
upcoming. I think this is the first one. This is the first of many. We're gonna invite more people to come and share about the positive changes for the ecosystem, especially from an angle of social entrepreneurship. Until next time, I'm Reza signing off. Thank you.
Thank you.